I'm Tolulope Adeleru-Balogun. There seems to be some progress in wage disputes in South Africa that pushed the country into stage 6 load shedding on Tuesday evening. Eskom has tabled a new offer which will officially be presented to the unions on Friday at the Central Bargaining Forum. Striking workers have returned to work this morning, and Eskom says it will take a few weeks for some sort of normalcy to return to its operations. This is Business Edge. Let's get started with the African business headlines. Botswana's government and Anglo-Americans De Beers Group have extended their agreement for the sale of rough diamond production from its joint venture Dapswana by a year to June 2023. Dapswana sells 75% of its output to De Beers, with the balance taken up by state-owned Okavango Diamond Company. Uganda has made an about-turn and relaxed tough import conditions it set for vehicles entering its market from July that are at least 9 years old. Now, this deals a setback to Kenyan dealers who had hoped to benefit from curbs on the sale of such automobiles. In April, the Ugandan Revenue Authority issued a directive that imports of vehicles over 9 years old had to be cleared under the East Africa Community's single customs territory, which allows members of the bloc to jointly collect customs taxes. However, the amendment to the earlier directive is that the rule will now apply to vehicles more than 13 years old. The state-owned National Oil Corporation of Kenya will from August start shipping fuel from Saudi Arabia at lower prices than the global rate in the latest push by the government to lower pump prices. This is through a government-to-government deal that will see the state-owned Saudi Aramco supply NOC with refined fuel at exclusively lower prices than the global cost of crude. NOC will, under the deal, import 30% of the country's monthly petroleum requirements from August in what is likely to help push down pump prices and ease the burden on consumers. NOC says an MOU has been signed on this issue. Siemens Egypt has signed an agreement with Al Atal Holding and Sigma for smart cities to establish the first residential complex in the new administrative capital. This smart city will use artificial intelligence and metaverse data to reduce operating costs, raise maintenance efficiency, and improve performance. This will be done through the establishment of an electronic platform that contributes to reducing energy consumption, predicting faults, and handling operating errors. The African Development Fund's Board of Directors has approved a $2 million technical assistance grant to fund research that will support energy reforms in Nigeria and other West African states. A circular announcing the grant says that the ultimate objective is to stimulate cross-border electricity trade and improve energy access in the 15 countries in the region. And after the break, we are in South Africa with the latest on the wage dispute between Eskom and unions. Workers are back at work peacefully today. Is this the beginning of a resolution to this strike? More after the break. South Africa's Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan has said that accumulation of factors, including violent intimidation, are responsible for South Africa seeing some of its worst load shedding on record. There have been accusations and counter-accusations on both sides of the divide, with Eskom being accused of walking out of wage negotiations last week. The public utility denied this, saying it tabled a final offer which quarters of organized labor rejected. But news broke on Tuesday that a new offer has been tabled by Eskom and will be discussed at the Central Bargaining Forum on Friday. Ahead of that, let's look at what the issues are, who the players are, what the demands are, and if we can expect a resolution to come from the central bargaining sometime soon. Joining me from Pretoria, South Africa is Helgrad. Cronje. He's the Deputy General Secretary for the Public Sector at Solidiryt, one of the unions involved in the wage dispute. Helgrad, welcome to Business Edge. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon in South Africa now.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Tolu.
So it seems initially by some reports that Solidarity wasn't completely in favor of this strike. So can you first start with clarifying that situation and take us through how Solidarity got involved in the wage dispute?
Look, Solidarity is a recognized union at Eskom, which means we have a certain amount of members and we are part of the bargaining unit. Eskom is within the South African labour legislation classified as an essential service, which basically means that the employees of Eskom aren't allowed to go out on strike. There are other procedures in place to ensure that the disputes can be resolved peacefully without the disturbance of the services that Eskom has to deliver to the citizens of South Africa. Solidarity throughout the negotiation process made it clear that we aren't in favour of going out on strike action or protest action because it is illegal. So we've distanced ourselves from those type of actions, and we've also communicated to our members not to partake in such type of action.
You've explained that electricity workers, sort of the ones under Eskom, would be seen as essential workers. Your members are not the ones necessarily on the other side of the picketing line. They are still working, but you're involved in negotiations. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Our members went to work. Some of them worked extra shifts to keep the power stations running. But we indicated that we will follow the normal procedure that is in place to resolve these disputes.
Okay, so getting into the dispute issues now, what are the interests that Solidarity members have with this? What are your own demands? We've heard the demands from the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa, the National Union of Mine Workers, but particularly for Solidarity, it sort of gets lost in the demands of those two major unions. What are Solidarity's demands in the context of this Eskom wage dispute?
The current Solidarity demand on the table is a demand that mirrors that of Eskom in the sense that it is also in the form of a sliding scale based on the different job grades and job levels within Eskom. It basically means that people on a specific job level will receive a specific increase based on that job level. And the range is basically between 5.5% and 6.5%. That is where we are currently at.
And that actually is above what it looks like Eskom is offering, as the last official offer Eskom gave was an increase of between 4% to 5.3%, which the company says is in line with the Reserve Bank's inflation target range of 3 to 6%. And that would be for nearly all 30,000 employees in the bargaining unit. So NUMSA asked for about 15% going in. They've come down to 12% across board in the third round of negotiations in early June. When it comes to these negotiations, it seems that the unions involved are not all on the same page. Is there a way for you guys to reach a compromise? Because how can you make demands if there is not one voice? Has that been an issue in this wage dispute?
It's not unusual for unions to at some point join forces and consolidate their demands. That usually happens during a specific time in the negotiations when the time is right for that to happen. At this stage, I think all three unions were on the same page with regards to the fact that Eskom declared a deadlock within the negotiations prematurely. We did not go out on strike because of that. It seems as though some of the members of the other two units have. But I mean, we agree on the fact that Eskom pulled out of the negotiations prematurely, and we were of the view that unions can even move closer at some point, and all three unions were still at the negotiating table trying to seek solutions, and Eskom indicated that they cannot move from their offer. So it's not unusual for unions to consolidate the offer and put the offer for organised labour forward, but it only happens at the stage where all parties come to the table and want to negotiate, and Eskom basically declared a dispute and wanted to take the matter to the CCMA, the Commission, for basically mediating the process.
So let's talk about the CCMA, but before that, as you mentioned earlier, your union sees Eskom workers as essential services and that there are different sort of rules of engagement. If Eskom had not maybe mentioned the CCMA and we had not seen workers go out on strike, what were the other opportunities or the other avenues that this dispute could have taken in terms of having the talks and the negotiations without strike action being called?
Look, I think first prize would have been that parties would still have been around the negotiating table without referring dispute to the CCMA. But once parties reach a deadlock, because Eskom is viewed as an essential service, the parties need to refer a dispute to the CCMA, who then facilitates firstly a process to try and mediate and get the parties to find a settlement, a common ground. But if that doesn't happen, that process basically goes into an arbitration process where the CCMA has the power to firstly hear the side of all the parties and then make a finding and a decision as to what a reasonable increase would be, if an increase is reasonable at all. So they look at all the facts, and it's basically a legal case. So all parties have their legal teams, they present their case, they present the facts, and based on that, the CCMA would make a decision as to what a reasonable increase would be or not.
So in terms of that, I have to ask, are you in support of the fact that there has been a strike action and some workers of Eskom have actually laid down their tools?
No, we aren't. As I've said before, we've officially distanced ourselves from that process. We are of the view that there are other ways to resolve these disputes. The fact of the matter is, this illegal strike action basically leads to the detriment of the economy of South Africa, and it's not in the best interest of any citizen if our economy goes in a downward spiral because of the fact that we are in a stage 6 load shedding.
All right, so I want us to take a break here because we also need to look at the new offer. There are some questions about that and some clarity that I'm sure you can give us, and then look to what could possibly happen at the Central Bargaining Forum on Friday. So we'll pick up the thread of the conversation there. South Africa has entered stage 6 load shedding, which means it is a very difficult time for many South Africans and South African businesses right now. But could there be a resolution in view with the parties involved meeting at the Central Bargaining Forum on Friday? We'll get into that and what to expect from the process after this. Now, still with me from Pretoria, South Africa, is Helgrad Cronje. He's the Deputy General Secretary for the Public Sector at Solidiryt, a union in South Africa involved in wage disputes with other unions. Now, a new offer was tabled by Eskom yesterday, and that offer will be formally disclosed on Friday at the formal negotiation session. Now, Helgrad, your organization, your union, has agreed to take part in Friday's talks. What are you expecting from the offer? You've made it quite clear that Solidiryt has not yet seen the offer from Eskom, but what are you expecting? If you had a crystal ball, what do you think is inside?
Look, I think it's going to be quite similar to what we currently have on the table. It might be a bit more or a bit less, but we believe it will be more or less in the range of our current demand, which will leave us as a union in a good position. I think the question will be whether it would be something that the NUN and NUMSA, the other two trade unions involved, would consider. But we expect nothing less than a tough day of negotiations and hopefully a resolution, because that would be in the best interest of our country.
So given the fact that the other two unions involved are also back at the table on Friday, do you think we're finally on the path to resolution of this particular issue?
Yes, I definitely think so. There is no other way to resolve this than for parties to speak to each other. And it's definitely a good step. As far as we know, the offer has been tabled unofficially to the top leadership of the two other unions involved, which means if they agreed to ask their members to return to work, that they believe it's an offer that can be considered. It should be a positive step. It should be a step in the right direction. And we believe and trust and hope that it would lead to positive results.
Sometimes it's best to be prepared for a worst case scenario. So in this situation, the strike hasn't officially been called off, but the workers for these unions have returned to work today. What do you think could happen on Friday that could force the unions to possibly send their members back on strike or ask them to down tools again, depending on how things sort of played out at the collective bargaining forum?
Look, the worst case scenario would be if Eskom comes back to the negotiating table and simply puts forward their previous offer, which was the one that unions could not accept. So something like that or insubstantial increase in their demand would definitely lead to probably the type of reaction where employees will go back out. During interviews yesterday, which I was a part of, and the other two unions were part of, the top leadership made it clear that they did not officially call for a strike. And they sort of said that the action by Eskom basically provoked the employees, and the employees went out of their own accord, and not because the union asked them to go out on strike. So hopefully whatever Eskom tables tomorrow will be something that the other unions view as respectful and something that they can consider.
Are there concerns as to where Eskom will get this money? This is a struggling and ailing utility, almost close to 400 billion rand in debt. Even before the strike has been struggling, and South Africa has been in various stages of load shedding because of old equipment, maintenance failures, and other things like that. Are the unions, is Solidarity particularly concerned with where the money for this increase will come from?
Yes, without a doubt. I think that is part of the reason that our offer is substantially, or our demand is substantially lower than that of the other unions. We are sensitive to the fact that the South African economy is under pressure, and an ailing economy, and the fact that our government debt is extremely high, because I think at the end of the day, because it is a state-owned enterprise and government is responsible to fund money in cases like this, we are definitely sensitive to that, and it's a definite concern. The fact of the matter is, we cannot continue to rely on government to bail these state-owned enterprises out. But at this stage, it's far worse if Eskom doesn't provide electricity or sufficient electricity. I think it's a far worse event for our economy if we don't have proper power, because it then also impacts other businesses.
And this really leads me into my next question. Stage 6 load shedding. For those who don't know, that means that 6 hours of power outages are broken into 2-hour blocks for South Africans. That happened yesterday and is also expected to happen today, Wednesday as well. The last time it was this bad was in December of 2019. There have been different estimates as to what load shedding throughout the years have cost South Africa's economy. But this particular one that's tied now to the wage dispute, do you think it's possible to quantify the cost to the economy? What do you think, even if we can't get a number figure or a figure for it, where do you think it has affected South Africa's economy?
Look, I mean, the fact of the matter is, if you close a business for 4 hours a day, they can only trade for half the time. So if the stage 6 continues for the time being, it will basically lead to a situation where companies can only trade for half of the day, or they have to find alternative forms of energy, which obviously costs higher. So it has a big impact on the cost of businesses to do their business, and that leads to job losses at the end of the day, because businesses cut costs. So it's very difficult to quantify, as we don't even know how long it will take after employees have returned for all the power stations and power units to get back on the grid. There's different problems at different power stations, and they will take different times to repair, which means we aren't sure. It's very difficult to quantify, but it's going to have a big impact on our economy.
Very true. So let me ask this final question before I let you go. The unions in South Africa are quite powerful, and the conversation in terms of privatizing public entities has been quite a prolonged, proactive, and very controversial one. But we're hearing that there's the potential that Eskom should be privatized. We know that the president last year spoke about unbundling Eskom into 3 separate entities, but it means those will be 3 separate public entities. Where does Solidarity stand on the potential of privatizing Eskom so that there's more efficiency, there's investment, and then there's just a better turnaround and deliverables to the South African public?
Look, I mean, as an organization, we support the free market, and with that comes the decentralization of public enterprises and privatization of public enterprises. So ideologically, I think we stand opposed to most of the other unions. We support privatization of state-owned enterprises, and we believe that the solution for the many ailing state-owned enterprises within South Africa lies within the concept of privatization. So we support privatization. Whether we support the unbundling of Eskom in the current form that it is in, I think is a debate for another day, because it will still remain state-owned. So we have our questions about that. But we definitely support privatization of state-owned enterprises as an organization.
And now your answer actually now leads me to my final question. So for an organization, a union, which puts its members' interests at the forefront, what would privatization look like for Solidarity in terms of protecting the interest of those, let's use Eskom, that are working at Eskom if it was to be privatized?
Look, I mean, privatization doesn't necessarily mean that you close the business or you change the business. Ideally, the concept would mean that the ownership of those businesses is sold to private individuals or companies or public companies, and that the employees will simply be employed by a new employer, but they would continue doing what they do. And you would hope that those private entities would have capital to invest and to streamline the business and to do better business than government has been able to. I think private entities mostly also don't struggle as much with corruption. You know, you've got issues, you've got the Steinhoffs of this world, which have their problems, but mostly private companies are far more successful. And within South Africa, there are examples of this being done successful. If you look at Telkom and the way that Telkom has been decentralized and basically privatized, there are success stories, and you know, I think at this point it's a far more successful business if you compare it to where Eskom and the other state-owned enterprise like Denel is.
All right, Helgrad, we'll stop the conversation there for now. We look forward to touching base with you after the negotiations at the Central Bargaining Forum on Friday and see if the unions have been able to reach some sort of resolution towards this. Thank you so much for joining me on Business Edge.
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right. And it's not just the unions that are invested in the Eskom wage dispute. South Africans have experienced stage 6 load shedding for the first time since 2019. But it can get worse. After stage 6 is stage 7 and yes, even stage 8. This issue is one that continues to be one we will be following very closely. Now let's pause the conversation for now. Up next is international business news. And we get straight to it with European Central Bank policymakers weighing whether or not they should announce the size and duration of their upcoming bond buying scheme, which is designed to curb financing costs for Italy and other debt-laden countries. The ECB is set to announce the new tool on July 21st, along with its first interest rate hike in more than a decade. And this comes in response to a surge in bond yields that have hit the most indebted countries the hardest. ECB staff are preparing different options for policymakers, including how many of its details, such as the firepower and the duration, should be made public, according to conversations with half a dozen policymakers at the ECB's annual forum in Portugal. The pros of announcing a large envelope would include putting investors' minds at ease about the ECB's commitment to fighting what it calls financial fragmentation in the Eurozone. And moving on, Vietnam's economy grew at the fastest pace in nearly a decade in the second quarter, thanks to a rebound in exports and manufacturing that have helped offset risk from coronavirus outbreaks and rising oil prices. Gross domestic product grew by a quicker than estimated 7.72% in the April to June period from a year earlier. Data released by the General Statistics Office shows that the performance helped lift growth in the first half to 6.42% from a year ago, beating the GSO's forecast for a 5.5% pace. The government targets full-year growth at between 6 and 6.5%. The first 6 months have seen recovery in almost every sector of the economy, with manufacturing, exports, retail sales, banking, and insurance businesses leading the gains. The government will focus on closely monitoring prices of essential goods, especially petroleum products, in the second half to check inflation. Hungary has passed a decree empowering the government to take over supervision of vital energy firms and the gas pipeline network operator FGSZ in an emergency that requires it to ensure continuous supply. Signed by Prime Minister Victor Orban, it covers key firms in the power, gas, and oil industries, as well as district heating firms and mining, along with gas pipeline operator FGSZ and a fuel and gas stockpiling association. Hungary is about 85% reliant on Russian gas imports and 65% reliant on crude oil imports from Russia. After seeing explosive growth over the last few years, the use of cryptocurrencies to pay for real estate has practically come to a standstill in the aftermath of a precipitous decline in the value of digital assets. A report from the property technology firm Juwai IQI noted that over the last 5 years, worldwide cryptocurrency payments for residential and commercial real estate have increased from almost nothing to about $100 million. Last year, the use of Bitcoin and crypto to pay for real estate anywhere in the world was still in relative infancy, and it is now on hold again as a result of the crisis, which has seen the value of Bitcoin, the most widely used digital currency, decrease by 60%, briefly reaching a low of $18,000 in June. American e-commerce giant eBay is the latest mainstream brand getting into the metaverse after submitting various trademark applications for different products in the space. The company applied for non-fungible tokens, or MTFs, NTF exchanges, and FTF trading, as well as virtual goods marketplaces and online retail stores with physical and virtual goods. The application was submitted before the United States Patent and Trademark Office. You're watching Business Edge. We'll take a quick time out now. When we come back, there's more after this. You missed a fantastic conversation yesterday on Business Edge where we looked at the European Union Commission extending a new hand of friendship and partnership as well as trade to the African continent. I spoke to Ali Khan Sachu, Africa geoeconomist as well as micro-analyst, on what the continent could expect on this partnership. And funny enough, it was also a day where the European Union and Nigeria were talking about their own partnership. With Nigeria being blessed with an abundance of mineral resources and a vibrant, growing and industrial economy as well, firms are delivering services in the oil and gas industry, healthcare, technology, agriculture, finance, maritime, and so much more. Several small and medium firms are providing varied services for overall economic growth. And to tap into this, particularly for exports into the European market and to drive investment opportunities and develop the value chain, Nigeria and the European Union are holding a forum for business operators, business owners, investors, and all who are interested in a handshake across the ocean. Lekan Onobanjo was at that event and he has the details.
Nigeria has a vast potential for industrialized growth with natural or raw material resources that catch the eye of other continents, making it a destination choice for countries in areas of investments and bilateral relationship. Europe is one of them. This media briefing, a prelude to the 8th edition of the European Union Nigeria Business Forum to be held in Lagos, seeks to identify new opportunities to unlock the Nigerian economy, particularly in the areas of backward integration of government policies, gas exports to Europe, and the development of the agricultural sector.
You know very well that Nigeria is the largest gas producer in Africa and the 9th largest producer of gas in the world, accounting for about 3% of global reserves. The current international situation actually is pushing the European Union and its member states, as you know, to diversify the sources. And in this framework, we think that we have opportunities there that we want to explore with Nigeria about how we can strengthen the partnership that already exists.
If we identify a product where they actually take pride in it and develop it, and they can command a premium price on the global market, not just locally, you can see how that will add value and create wealth and jobs in the rural communities.
No doubt there are security and infrastructural challenges to improving Nigeria's capacity in these areas. However, Europe is hoping that with its interventions and engagements with government, it could facilitate public-private partnership and business-friendly policy recommendations, which will reduce impediments to a better business ecosystem.
We have to take into account the existing farmers-herders conflicts. And this is why we are also thinking in our projects of conflict-smart agriculture. So agricultural practices helping the communities to build and to work together rather than oppose one another.
The European Union Nigeria Business Forum will feature exhibitions, robust discussions and recommendations for increased investment inflows, enhanced access to the EU market, and the building of many strategic partnerships. Lekon Onobanjo reporting for News Central.
And Lekon Onobanjo will be live as that event kicks off tomorrow, so make sure you are live right here on Business Edge. We'll be bringing you all the details of the conversations and the investment opportunities being discussed at the European Union Nigeria Business Forum happening in Lagos, Nigeria. But that's not the only thing we want to tell you about. We also need to look about how the environment and the drive for the circular economy are joining together. Now, Bettina Nwele was at an event this past few days which actually looked at what we could do in terms of recycling. Africa produces around 70 million tons of waste every year, according to the World Bank Urban Development Series report. And with rapid urbanization and growing economies, waste production on the continent will exceed 160 million tons by 2025. The Circular Economy Innovation Partnership organized a waste value chain tour, and let's see what Africans are creating in the waste value chain.
Waste is a problem because it causes pollution, disease, and environmental crisis when it's not properly disposed of. The good news is that most of the waste produced in Africa can be recycled and reused to create new products. Sadly, only about 10% of the waste generated every day in Africa is collected. The rest usually ends up in illegal dump sites, gutters, and drainages in Africa's cities. Recycling is not a common culture in Africa, but there are certain individuals who are making a difference.
Nigerians actually recycle, but more like at a home level. Maybe in your house, you might reuse your bucket or reuse something. But it's not been centralized as a nation. We haven't centralized it yet. But I would like to give a kudos to Lagos State for trying and moving towards centralizing circularity and centralizing recycling. So you have lots of innovations going out for the government. In fact, the Loop Lab is one of such programs supported through the Circular Lagos, where the government is supporting private sector to make recycling like a centralized system.
Plastic is difficult to recycle as it comes in several different chemical variations. All collected plastics have to be sorted according to the type of chemical composition before most can be recycled, but the lack of infrastructure and logistics requirements in Africa hinders this. The cost associated with recycling plastics such as hauling, sorting, cleaning, and breakdown into flakes known as fiber does not come cheap.
We are kind of preaching circularity, waste circularity. So we collect such waste and convert the waste into electricity that can be used by such restaurant.
So what we do is that we make use of pure water sachets. We also make use of cloth waste, but majorly for now we make use of pure water sachets to create solutions to some of the problems that we have in our country right now. And that is unemployment. And our solution is in 3 ways. We try to make sure that we create awareness in schools and communities. We also create empowerment for women and girls at various communities, because we thought of, why do we have to be carrying our waste all around? Why don't we just create that opportunity, convert it where those wastes are being generated?
Turning waste to wealth requires financial support. A public and private partnership in order to be successful in the development, implementation, and operation of functional recycling plants in and around Africa. Bettina Unwili, News Central TV.
So some cities across the continent might just be sitting on a gold mine of waste. And now with the circular economy getting involved, we might be seeing employment and, of course, revenue. You're watching Business Edge. We'll be taking a quick time out. When we come back, we'll wrap things up with NC4 to watch. And here are a few stories we're keeping track of with NC4 to watch as we wrap things up. Now, Nigeria's Securities and Exchange Commission says that as of December 31st, 2021, the amount of unclaimed dividends increased to 180 billion naira. Lamido Yuguda, the Director General of SEC, said that the Commission is striving to reduce the amount of unclaimed dividends to 0%. South Africa's government defended its plan to end special permits that allow more than 178,000 Zimbabweans to live and work in the country and said only a small percentage of them have applied to regularize their stay. The Zimbabwe exemption permits, first granted in 2009, were never expected to be permanent, and that's Clayson Monyela, head of the public diplomacy at South Africa's Department of International Relations and Cooperation, saying that. Now, these permits are expected to expire in December. Sudan and China are celebrating the launch of the Sudan-China Express, the first direct maritime shipping route between the two countries. A 32,000-ton maximum capacity cargo ship disembarked on her maiden voyage along the new routes from the Sudan port on June 11th and is expected to arrive at her destination, the Chinese eastern seaport of Qingdao, on July the 1st. And finally, crude oil took a breather after a three-day rally as concerns over a demand-sapping recession filtered back into the market, overshadowing signs that global stockpiles and supply continue to tighten. And that's it with Business Edge for today. Don't forget to follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. Download our mobile app, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and watch us on all of the platforms we have available. There's a lot more coming your way at the top of the 12 o'clock hour West African time. News Central Now will have the latest news and information from here on the continent and beyond. I'll see you again soon. I'm Tolulope Adeleru-Balogun.